Look, here's a headline for you to start the day. White British people will become a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years. Just think about that. White British people will become a minority in the UK population within the next 40 years. Now, for those of us who have British ancestors, who've studied the kings and queens of England in school history classes, who speak the English language, who think of pork pies, Big Ben, red phone boxes and all of that when we think of Britain, the idea that those isles, before too long, will not be majority white does, I think, take a bit of getting used to. Now, the headline comes from a new study by Professor Matt Goodwin. He's of Buckingham University, and he used something called the cohort component method. I think that's something many demographers utilise to try to predict the trend going forward. And as the professor says, unless there is a radical change of policy, the share of the UK population that is white British will fall sharply from just over 70% today to below 34% by the year 2100. In other words, a tourist to London in, say, 70 years' time will be walking among a very different demographic as they take in the sights of Piccadilly Circus compared with a visitor in the 1980s. Now, I guess the story here isn't so much that it highlights a changing population. Cities in particular have never been static entities. But it's the pace of change playing out before the British public's eyes that is the story. And whether that change is net positive or not, if it all happens too fast, the existing cohort will revolt. And that'll be out of fear that their customs, their language, laws and general way of life are under threat. I mean, that is simply the natural reaction. And it'd present itself in Bangalore as much as it would in Birmingham. But you see, none of this is by accident. The trend now presenting in the data is the result of years of government policy in Westminster by both Labor and Conservative administrations. As the UK Telegraph points out, Professor Goodwin's report follows a period of unprecedented legal and illegal migration to Britain, those numbers hitting a record high of 906,000 in 2023 alone. And as we speak, the British southeast coast is being swamped by an endless wave of inflatable dinghies loaded with so-called asylum seekers, effectively waved across the channel by the French. Now, all of those that are eventually granted the right to permanent residency accelerate the demographic change identified by Goodwin. Now, of course, in some areas, especially some of Britain's bigger cities, the proportion of the population that has Anglo-Saxon or Celtic ancestry has already slipped into the minority. The 2022 census found both London and Birmingham had become minority white British. Many other areas in the old industrial north would also be the same. But of course, one's skin colour matters naught. It matters naught. In the post-Martin Luther King world, the sensible people have come to appreciate that we don't judge someone by the colour of their skin, but rather by the nature of their character. In other words, one doesn't have to be white to be British. Britishness, like Australianness, is more a state of mind. It's a membership of a shared set of values and ideas, much more so than it is a shake of the old family tree. So all of those trends and population changes, they only matter if they come with associated shifts in attitudes to the traditional ties that bind. Now, as Professor Goodwin found, by the end of this century, most of the people in Britain will not be able to trace their roots in the country back more than one or perhaps two generations. Now, again, they need not matter as long as the process of integration is robust and effective. But as he goes on to say, quote, "This raises enormous questions about the capacity of our country and leaders to unify people around a shared sense of identity, values, ways of life and culture, and avoid the very real risk of us becoming what Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, referred to in May as an island of strangers." End quote. Well, sadly, Britain's leaders have shown scant recent capacity to unify people around those said values, culture, etc. And you get the feeling that having stuffed themselves like a foie gras goose full of post-colonial guilt, they're petrified to champion the institutions and the cultural pillars that built one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. But unless they get on the front foot and start asserting what makes Great Britain great, And no, diversity in and of itself isn't top of that list. They risk returning to an age before the evolution of the nation-state, or at the very least, a nation-state where the traditional British values are usurped by those of somewhere else. Now, as they say, demography is destiny. And when you dig a little deeper into Professor Goodwin's report, the UK-born fertility rate is 1.39. Now, the foreign-born rate is just a touch under 2. And if that holds true for a bunch of decades, the face of Britain is guaranteed to change, even if immigration is substantially reined in. But of course it won't be, but nonetheless the mathematics is true. Now obviously it's a similar story out here. The face of Australia has been evolving since the 1950s, and that evolution is clearly gathering pace. Now again, just like with Britain, it need not be anything to fear or worry about, as long as government demand adherence to the rules, institutions and cultural norms that were the cornerstone of our extraordinary success. They are the magic ties that bind, irrespective of someone's heritage. But there's no doubt that the pace of change, even here, is proving a challenge. And it does present genuine questions about what such huge, indeed unprecedented changes in the composition of the population will mean for the future of nations all over the world, in fact, undergoing such an alteration.
This is a superfast...
You can keep that coming in, 0460873873. Steve's buzzed in. Hi, Steve.
Yeah, hey, Michael. How are you?
Good, mate, thanks.
What you were just talking about, demographics and countries, something that would be close knowledge for you is that Angela Merkel, going back a number of years ago, threw the gates open to over 1 million North African refugees, and very quickly the German people realised that within a generation, because all of those people took up citizenship, that within a generation they would completely change the demographics and the voting power as a bloc away from the German people.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true. The German political system is naive in some respects, isn't it, Steve? Because you had the CDU, which was Merkel's party, the Christian Democratic Union, centre-right party, opened the doors, the demography changed, and then they get upset when the AfD rises. And they say, well, hang on, how come this mob's getting so much support? I mean, you caused it, fellas. So it's, it's a strange old system, but there are long-term consequences. Now, as I said, it need not be negative if people who arrive in whatever country around the world adopt and absorb the cultural and legal and whatever framework that is existing in the country. But if people come in and then want to change it, then we've got a problem.
That's exactly what happened with a lot of the youth gangs 10 years later, and the gang rapes and everything that was going on in Germany. The moral and the whole moral fabric was starting to be changed and undermined by a group that was allowed in. That's right. And Germany is still dealing with that problem today. I go back there quite frequently, as you know, and it is something that many people talk about in Germany. And it is playing out in their politics today. And that is, well, what are we looking at now? 10, 15 years almost, or 10 years, I think, after that decision by Angela Merkel, or close to now probably. And yet it is still manifesting one way or the other in the way that people vote and talk politics in Germany even to this day, and will continue to. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate your call, 131873. Over to Perth quickly here.